نبدأ على بركة الله أولى جلسات هذا المنتدى. الجلسة الأولى بعنوان التوجيهات الحديثة في تخطيط المدن. يرأس هذه الجلسة معالي المهندس إبراهيم بن محمد السلطان أمين منطقة الرياض، فليتفضل مشكورا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله والصلاة على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. يسرني أن أرأس الجلسة الأولى في هذا المنتدى الأول للتخطيط الحضري، والذي يتم برعاية كريمة من خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك سلمان بن عبد العزيز. ويسرني أيضا في البداية أن أشكر معالي وزير الشؤون البلدية والقروية على تنظيم مثل هذا المنتدى، وأيضا الشكر موصول للإخوان لسعادة رئيس اللجنة المهندس عبد الرحمن بن حسن آل الشيخ، ولأعضاء اللجان المشاركين. عنوان موضوعنا لهذه الجلسة الأولى هو التوجهات الحديثة في تخطيط المدن، ومعنا اليوم 3 متحدثين. المتحدث الأول هو الأستاذ توان كي أو، يعمل حاليا مدير مركز المدن الجاذبة للعيش والعمل بوزارة التنمية الوطنية بسنغافورة. يشرف على برامج تنمية القدرات والمبادرات وبرامج التعاون مع المنظمات الاستشارية في مجال المدن المستدامة. وأيضا تعتبر برامج تنمية القدرات هي المجال الرئيس لأنشطة المركز ضمن رؤيته ليصبح أكاديمية رائدة للمدن، حيث يعتبر برنامج الإدارة الحضرية للموظفين المحليين من أهم البرامج التي يقوم بها مركز المدن الجاذبة لبناء القادة وتأهيلهم في مجال إدارة المدن. فالمتحدث الأول هو الأستاذ توان كي أو. Please, you can start. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Your Excellencies. It gives me great pleasure to be here today to share a bit about Singapore's development journey over the years. My name is Tuan Kee. I'm from the Center for Liveable Cities, and that is a center that is part of the Ministry of National Development. I've been asked to speak about planning for the urban transformation for a sustainable future, and I'll do this through going through Singapore's developmental trajectory over the last 50 years or so, from which various key lessons and principles can be extracted and applied, hopefully, to other cities as well. Let me start by sharing about the work we do at the Center for Livable Cities. The Livable Cities is essentially a key element of our development journey. And at the center, our vision is to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. And this is closely aligned and complementary to the United Nations Habitat 3's New Urban Agenda. We share the same beliefs in the importance of embracing urbanization at all levels of human settlements and integrating equity to the development agenda, which we have captured under the concept of livability. In the CLC Liveability Framework, we believe that these aims may be achieved through 3 key urban outcomes, and these outcomes may be found in the red, yellow, and green circles, which represents a high quality of life, a competitive economy, and having a sustainable environment. Let's take a look at Singapore's constraints and challenges. Today, Singapore's population is just over 5.5 million, with a high density of almost 7,700 persons per square kilometer. As a city with a land area of only 719 square kilometers, we are not big. Yet Singapore is both a city and a country. We are surrounded by the sea with almost no natural resources. We have to fit in the needs of a nation. such as seaports, airports, military training grounds, water catchment areas, industrial areas, etc., which are not typical expected within a city. As the population grows, Singapore faces unique challenges, and there will be more need to focus on issues like resources like energy, water, food, and also catering to the diverse needs of our multiracial citizens, an aging and declining local population, and also the integration of new citizens. More importantly, we will need to maintain and improve livability even as density increases, as we expect more people to be living and working and going to the cities to find new employment opportunities. And to overcome this and to sustain growth, Singapore has adopted an integrated and long-term planning approach to optimize our resources in order to ensure a clean and green environment, provide adequate housing, and also integrate various modes of transportation. In the mid-50s, Singapore was not only a city with a population of 1.5 million, it was struggling to survive in a little island, bursting at its seams. And we had slums, we have traffic congestions, we have crimes, we have diseases, and we have water shortages, floods. Basically, every problem associated with rapid urbanization. We were not very livable, and certainly not sustainable at the rate that we were going. Singapore today is an economically vibrant city-state with a beautiful and clean environment to live in, efficient infrastructure, and 100% access to clean water. Even as we are one of the most densely populated countries in the world, at the heart of our achievements is our commitment to provide good homes and a good living environment in a sustainable way. The Liveability Framework captures the approaches that Singapore has taken and the key lessons learned in its urban development since its independence. The framework is like an iceberg, with the livability outcomes of economic competitiveness, sustainable environment, and quality of life being very visible and measurable above the waterline. But what sustain these outcomes are the latent urban systems of an integrated urban approach to planning and also dynamic urban governance. And these two systems can be further broken down into key principles that were and still are practiced across agencies in Singapore. And we share the lessons learned with others as well. In my presentation today, I will share what Singapore has done since independence to today, which demonstrate these principles, and more importantly, to illustrate how Liveability Framework can be a model for planning, development, and management of a livable and sustainable city. As a general overview, Singapore's journey to becoming a livable yet sustainable city mirrors the aims and vision set forth by the United Nations UN Habitat over the years. We believe that these similarities are not coincidental, but rather a reflection of the common challenges that all developing countries face as they go through urbanization and industrialization. The main themes that surface in Habitat 1, Habitat 2, and Istanbul +5 conference revolve around adequate shelter, ensuring sustainable development, and urban governance. Like many cities today, Singapore was plagued with slums and widespread poverty in the 1950s, and many ills of urbanization such as unemployment, poor sanitary conditions, pollution, social strife, flooding, and traffic congestions was something very common to us. This spurred concerted efforts after self-independence through mass public housing program from 1960, institutionalizing the mechanism for environmental protection and integrated planning from as early as the 1970s. Today, Singapore, although has achieved some success in these areas, we still hope to do more, as seen in the recently launched Sustainable Singapore Blueprint, which I will explain more in detail later. Soon after Singapore was granted self-rule in 1959, the government started a mass inoculation program against tuberculosis, smallpox, and many other diseases that was very common in that part of the world. Also, in a pledge to bring healthcare closer to the people, the government decentralized the focus of primary healthcare from an overcrowded main general hospital to a network of 26 satellite outpatient dispensaries and 26 maternal and child care and child health clinics in 5 years. And 2 years after independence in 1967, the Minister of Health declared that health would rank at most 5th in order of priority for public funds after national security, job creation, housing, and education. Next, I'll just talk a bit more about the housing program that we have. When Singapore was granted self-governance in 1959, it faced a severe housing shortage and overcrowding in urban slums and squatters. The then Housing Authority Singapore Improvement Trust, set up by the colonial government, was inefficient, building housing rates at the rate of 1,700 units per year. This was lagging behind even the natural increases in population, let alone accomplishing anything significant for the hundreds of thousands still living in squalor in the urban slums and squatter settlements. And in the 1960s, Singapore had a population of 1.6 million, but had 250,000 people living in urban slums and 300,000 people living in squatter settlements. It was estimated that 147,000 homes were needed from 1961 to 1970, which means that we have to build at a rate of about 11,500 units per year. In HDB's first 5-year housing program from 1960 to 1964, we built close to 45,000 units of low-cost housing, which was provided at a cost about nearly $200 million. By keeping up with, and in some years exceeding, its ambitious building targets, HDB was able to provide the necessary number of housing units for those in the low-income bracket who were in need of housing. In its formative years, the Housing Development Board, HDB, built almost twice as many units that the predecessor SIT built in 30 years. Well, the authority did not rest on its laurels as it quickly formulated successful 5-year housing programs to further combat the housing shortage and very quickly managed to break the back of the housing problems. Next, I'd like to talk a bit more about the Garden City that many of my friends here will be familiar with, Singapore. But it didn't start only recently. From as early as 1967, when Singapore was still a fledgling state coming into grips with rapid urbanization, founding Prime Minister Mr. Lee Kuan Yew declared his vision for Singapore to be transformed into a garden city. This was followed by various campaigns in the late 1960s and early 1970s, such as Keep Singapore Clean campaign and the Tree Planting Day. The Garden City vision eventually led to the formation of the Garden City Action Committee in 1970, which involved many government agencies coming under the close watch of the Prime Minister himself. And it was through this committee that greenery became consciously factored in overall land planning and land use development, including the provision of roadside planting and integration of parks into our housing estates. And it was the result of this vision and institutional setup that resulted in Singapore's green cover increasing from 35.8% in 1986 to almost 50% in 2011, despite urbanization and population growth. As we develop and as we rapidly urbanize, we at the city level tends to face different challenges at a different stage. And the next stage of challenge was really about balancing development and environment. So despite the focus on economic growth, environmental concerns were still big priorities for the then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. Well, the key strategies were incorporating environmental factors into land use planning, building environmental infrastructure, implementing environmental legislation and enforcement, and educating the public on environmental protection. A host of pollution control measures were introduced from 1970, with Mr. Lee stressing the need to clean up Singapore's physical environment, which had fallen into a dismayed state due to the rapid urbanization and industrialization in the previous 2 decades. Mr. Lee had a foresight to put into place pollution control measures right from the start, as he didn't want the problem to get out of hand before addressing it, and also anticipated that the industrialists exporting their activities to Singapore. So we were very careful about it. And institutions such as Air Pollution Unit was set up as early as 1971 with policies to tackle air and water pollution supported by the legal framework that also enforced standards such as our Clean Air Act and regulation on trade effluent discharge in the Singapore waterways. These are part and parcel of some of our key policy initiatives over the years. And even in the area of cleaning, something that most cities and many cities around the world have, like a river, was an immediate concern on the part of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. So from very early on, the government recognized that its economic progress should not come at the expense of the environment. And furthermore, that a clean and green Singapore was vital to attracting investments. A master plan for the monumental task of clearing up the Singapore River and the nearby Cullen Basin was drawn up in 1977, with the cleanup completed in 10 years at a cost of almost $300 million. An important local activity since the days of Singapore was a hub for entrepot trade. The Singapore River has fallen into a dismayed state when Singapore gained independence in 1965 due to the pollution caused by the various riverine activities that occurred along the way. So in 1977, Mr. Lee issued a challenge to improve the water quality so that fishing will be possible in the Singapore River within the 10 years. This ambitious effort to clean up the Singapore River was driven by the desire to eradicate the slums in the city centre out of public health concerns, the imperative to clean up the immediate vicinity of the emerging central business district and to release valuable land along the banks of Singapore River for future development. This cleanup was a monumental undertaking as it involved coordination among many government agencies. And this is something that many cities and many governments around the world face, because the arduous task of convincing people whose livelihoods depended on the river to believe in a vision of a clean water and the wider benefits it will bring, and the considerable resources required to provide that infrastructure for the resettlement of the squatters and the relocation of industries and farms were really something that was not straightforward. And as such, from the drawing of the master plan for the cleanup in 1977 to the completion of the project in 1987, 26,000 families were resettled, many farms were phased out, and many thousands of hectares of industrial cases or backyard industries were resettled into industrial estates. These again are part and parcel of some of the key policy shifts. I'd like to touch a bit more about the women's participation in the labour force in the Singapore story. In the 1970s and 1980s, we saw a shift from the focus on labour-intensive industry, such as manufacturing, towards skill-based, intensive, and capital-intensive industries, such as the electronic and chemical sectors. We saw an increase in the women's participation in the workforce, which also had equal access to education, jobs, and healthcare. And according to the Gender Inequality Index in the 2015 United Nations Human Development Report, we range from 0, which means completely equal achievement, to 1, to highly unequal achievement. Singapore ranked 13 out of the 155 countries with a score of 0.088. The Gender Inequality Index is based on the dimension of maternal mortality ratio and the adolescence or fertility rate, empowerment as measured by the share of parliamentary seats held by each sex and by the secondary and higher education attainment levels, and women's participation in the workforce. So, if I may add, the women labour market and the women in Singapore has contributed immensely to the development of Singapore as well. So, as you can see, many of our key policies over the years has actually been in line with the Habitat 3 commitments, and Singapore's effort has always been focused on delivering those outcomes. Let me just touch one more example on about concept plan, because we talk about planning. Singapore's second concept plan in 1991 was considered its water watershed plan, which was based on a framework of a Year X plan, which envisioned the physical land resource and land use structure when the population reached the ultimate size of 4 million. Well, involved the formation of interministerial committee with various sub-committees created to look in the areas of population, housing, transportation, commerce, environment, and recommended land strategies. The recommendation and any issues and conflicts were then discussed and considered holistically across all users by the steering committee, with the planners laying out their assumptions and projections. And one of the bold ideas articulated in the 1991 concept plan was integration between land use and transport planning, together with the decentralization of commercial activities from the central area. And this arose from Singapore's approach of planning land use and transport in an integrated manner, where many cities tend to deal with land use and transport planning separately. As we move towards the new urban agenda, the vision of a concept plan for Singapore in 2001 was towards a thriving world city in the 21st century. It aimed to provide a high-quality living environment with a wide choice of housing options and housing types to meet the different needs and aspirations of our people. This includes more housing options in the city so that we can inject more vibrancy into the central area. It also aims to transform Singapore into a global financial hub by setting aside land in the city to support the growth of the financial and services sector. Well, a new zoning system was proposed and implemented to differentiate between business and industrial users according to the pollutive nature of their users. A new white zone was also implemented to allow multiple users on the same site except for pollutive users. So this is just one example of how zoning laws have evolved over the years. It also emphasized enhancing Singapore's natural and built identity so as to create a distinctive city with a rich heritage, character, diversity, and identity. And to reach out to the various segments of the public, an extensive public consultation exercise was conducted as part of the concept planning process. As we move towards a focus on sustainable development, the focus on clean technology as a growth area is also something that we wanted to be mindful of. So in 2007, one of the strategic areas earmarked for research and development was the environment and water technologies, which focus in the areas of clean water and clean energy, with a budget of over 300 million committed over 5 years to grow the sector. Innovative efforts have been also centered around clean energy, testing urban solutions and water, with new technologies being tested with a view for them to offer sustainable alternative options in the future when they become more cost-effective. There's also been recently a focus on waste-to-energy initiative from a public policy perspective. And with the trend of increasing generation of waste, Singapore has in place a waste management system that recovers resources from waste even as recycling rates improve and as waste is minimized. Singapore has currently 4 waste incineration plants, which are also known as waste-to-energy plants, as the heat from the combustion process is used to generate superheated steam in boilers. The steam, in turn, is used to drive turbo generators to produce electricity. As we focus on new technologies to embrace a sustainable environment, we have continually committed efforts to greening. And even before Singapore's new commercial hub at the Marina Bay was developed, there was a vision for it to be flanked by water and nestled with a lush vegetation, and for Marina Bay to embody Singapore's aspiration to be a city in a garden, explaining the decision to have a bay instead of reclaiming the area of water body. This illustrates the guiding principles of foregoing short-term maximization of land revenue for long-term value by aiming for a better total environment. This philosophy eventually led to the crystallization of plans to set aside about 100 hectares of prime land in the city to construct 3 public gardens collectively known as Gardens by the Bay, which opened in 2011. And I strongly encourage and invite all my friends here to visit Gardens by the Bay if you happen to be in Singapore. Moving forward, being sustainable is also about getting the whole of government, whole of citizenry to think about sustainable issue. And one way that we have been trying to do that is by having a sustainable Singapore blueprint. So in 2008, the Interministerial Committee on Sustainable Development was set up to formulate a national strategy for Singapore's sustainable development in the context of domestic, global, and international challenges. I'll cover a bit more in the subsequent slides. As we move forward, the main themes that have surfaced in the lead-up to Habitat 3 center around sustainable development and social inclusion of cities that proceed alongside economic growth. Environmental resilience in the form of climate change, in mitigation and adaptation, as well as a sustainable and efficient infrastructure that leads to energy and resource efficiency are also key concerns for every city, including for Singapore. As mentioned earlier, Singapore has looked to address these same concerns through Sustainable Singapore Blueprint, which was first launched in 2008 and revived in 2015. In order to develop a holistic plan in creating a sustainable environment, an interministerial committee was set up with the aim to formulate a national strategy to address emerging domestic and global challenges. The IMCSD launched the Singapore Sustainable Blueprint in 2009 to outline our sustainable development goals in the current urban context, including strategies and initiatives for Singapore to achieve both economic growth and a livable and sustainable environment over the next 2 decades. In fact, as part of the outcome of the IMCSD work, the Center for Livable Cities was set up in 2008 as a knowledge center for a livable and sustainable city. So the SSB 2015 is the second blueprint on sustainable development after the first one was released in 2009. Statistics compiled by the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources showed that Singapore was mostly on track to meet the original 2030 target set in 2009 blueprint. The SSB 2015 will see these 20 targets stretch further, especially for indicators where Singapore had already exceeded the original target. And the 3 main themes for the SSB 2015 are a livable and enduring home, a vibrant and sustainable city, an active and gracious community. The blueprint also emphasizes the need to support these areas by establishing Singapore as a hub for sustainable development and the need to draw people, private and public sectors to act together for a sustainable Singapore. Environmental goals to be achieved by 2030 were also set in key areas such as air quality, mobility, resource sustainability, which Singapore is on track to achieve. For example, recycling rates have risen from 57% in 2009 to 60% in 2015, and domestic water consumption has fallen from 165 litres in 2003 to 151 litres in 2013. And more green and blue spaces have been built for our residents. These are the 5 trusts under the blueprint, namely eco-smart enduring homes, where more smart technologies and eco-friendly features will be embedded in towns and homes. You will never be too far away from green and blue spaces, and a green lifestyle will also be promoted with more ways for people to recycle as well to save energy and water. Second, a car-like Singapore. Seamlessly and efficient travel with a reduced reliance on car for fresher air and a lower carbon footprint through a denser rail network and extensive bus services, and promoting cycling and walking as modes of transportation. Third, towards a zero-waste nation. The government, the community, and the businesses has to come together to put in place infrastructure and programs that make reducing consumption as well as reusing and recycling materials as a way of life. Fourth, a leading green economy. We want to achieve the best-in-class in sustainability practices for businesses and living labs to test big ideas so that we can create exciting and meaningful green jobs. Fifth, an active and gracious community, shaping neighborhoods and building a more gracious society together as a community with people, businesses, and the government coming together to care for our common space, environment, and champion as a state, as a national level, a sustainable way of life. The foundation of the transformation into a livable and sustainable city began with and was sustained by the vision and pragmatism of our founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, to make Singapore a clean, green, and blue city in tandem with economic and urban development. It requires a well-functioning system of integrated planning and urban governance to achieve all these social, economic, and environmental objectives simultaneously, particularly with a high population density, lack of natural resources, and increasingly vocal populace. These principles guided Singapore as we navigated through our transformative journey over the last 50 years. And the strategies and main concerns may have evolved over time, but our commitment to creating a sustainable, livable city never wavered as we strive to improve on what we have already achieved. As Singapore continues to develop, it is expected that its population will increase, and with that, possibly bring various challenges such as increased population, the symptoms of climate change, such as flooding, and balancing the trade-off between urban development and conserving greenery and persuading more people to move away from a reliance on cars to adopt forms of active mobility. However, at Singapore, at the CLC, our role is really to distill and create the knowledge and best practices associated with livable and sustainable cities, guided by the principles outlined in the Liveability Framework. And this hopefully will help in anticipating and addressing some of these challenges before they get too large to manage. In view of these emergent challenges associated with managing urban growth that have become some of the most important, there will be...
Just 2 minutes to finish,
okay.
Please.
most important areas that will confront cities in the 21st century, we are also aligned with the Habitat agenda to ensure we create new multiple platforms we can get everybody around the world to come and talk about this issue. And we're going to have a World City Summit in July this year, and we strongly welcome all of you to join us. This just provides a glimpse of the 2014 conference in terms of the figures and some of the attendance. And this is my last slide, Chairman. So in summary, there is a strong resonance between the principles and outcomes in the livability framework and the main concerns that will feed into the new urban agenda. The lessons learned and the key learning points from Singapore's development trajectory distilled in the livability framework will therefore be a good model to be considered by many of my friends here for the planning, development, and management of a livable and sustainable city. With that, I sum up. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our development journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tuan. أي أسئلة سوف تكون بعد المتحدث الثالث. الآن الموضوع الثاني أو العرض الثاني عندنا هو بعنوان القيمة المضافة للتنمية في المدن الذكية والمستدامة. اسم المتحدث هو الدكتور فيليب موريس روفير. الدكتور فيليب هو يحمل درجة الدكتوراه في الدراسات الحضرية المعنية بمدن المستقبل والاستدامة الحضرية بفرنسا. يعتبر المؤسس والمدير الشريك للمكتب الاستشاري UVC المتخصص في الاستشارات الخاصة بخلق القيمة الحضرية للمشاريع والدراسات الاستراتيجية في المدن الذكية والمستدامة، خاصة في مجالات الأمن الحضري والنقل والطاقة والمياه وإدارة النفايات، وهو أحد الخبراء في المفوضية الأوروبية في مجال إدارة المخاطر الأمنية. فليتفضل مشكورا. Please. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Morning. Thank you. If you may, I will be standing here. Excellencies, Minister, distinguished audience, marhaba. Thank you for welcoming me here. Do you want to create value while optimizing investments in urban projects in your existing cities, brownfield cities, and your future cities, green cities? But before we need to understand if we want to plan for the future, we need to understand our past. Do you remember when cities were created? How many years ago cities were created? 12,000 years ago. And the most important question is not when they were created, but actually why these people decided to create a city and why additional people moved to these cities. The answer is that the cities create value for them. These cities created value for them. In the past, they moved to cities because it was safe. They were looking for safety. More recently, we are moving to cities. In the 50s, we moved to cities because we were looking for a better quality of life. In the 70s, something unique happened. The digital environment was created with the fiber optics, with the invention of internet. And that changed the way cities could be created, because we have demonstrated, the use of technology demonstrated that we can create jobs. And that was the case in Europe and in the States. Then, in 2000, we have seen these names of cities: intelligent cities, green cities, economic cities, and knowledge cities, ubiquitous cities, world cities. And we were all very confused by all these names, you know. And I could challenge you in the audience to give me the definition of all these type of cities. So, end of 2009, there were a big marketing campaign that launched the word smart city. And suddenly, the people just thought, oh, I know what it is. I am a smart man, I'm a smart person. We want to plan smart cities. Oh, I know what is a smart city. That means it's a city for me. But when you have three people and you ask the question, what is a smart city? You'll get 5 answers. Because for more than 6 years, we had no definition of what is a smart city. And actually, if I say no definition, some organization calculated more than 100 definitions. So the definition, the European Union coined this definition, saying that a smart city is a city that uses technology in order to support the urban development. But what I found, which was missing here, is that they just use technology, but they don't think of the sustainability of that use. Later on, a few months after, the ITU organization coined another definition. And they don't talk only about smart city, they talk about smart and sustainable city. So here, I'm very happy because they say if you use technology in your city, it has to be with a sustainable spirit. You know, you have to have this in mind. So let's go through the definition of this with this model. So when we talk about city, we need to talk about the people first. Because if you build a city which is not for the people, it can be a phantom city, like we can find in China, for example. So people are at the center of this city. We are in a smart city, so technology is important. So what do? We put sensors all around the city. And why we need these sensors is because we need to be informed of what happens in the city. Sensors are temperature level, pressure level, traffic lights, and even smartphones are sensors. From these sensors, we take information, they are data. So we capture data from the sensors. And with this data, we have a lot of data. So we can analyze the situation. We can analyze what happens in the city. And the way we analyze this is our own way to create value in our city. Because here, at that point, every city is different in the world. Because every city will use a different type of sensor. They will capture different type of data, and they will analyze this data differently. That means each city will create its own value. And if we are creating those values, it's only to develop a smart and sustainable city. Smart because we are using the technology, but sustainable because we want to live forever and sustain forever. How can we create more value? You remember in this smart city, we have this technology. So maybe I can create new sensors. I can develop hardware innovation. Sensors that don't exist today. And for sure, in 10 years, or even in 5 years, we will have sensors that don't exist today. This is hardware innovation. With this data, we can develop new software. Because before, we didn't have access to all these data. So thanks to this data, we can develop new software. And because we are good in analyzing information, we can develop new business model. Because when you do business, there are some business risks. You take the risk because you're not enough informed. So by being more informed of what happens in the city, you can develop new business model. And this is business model innovations. All these informations are meaningful if they are human-centered innovation. We can only innovate if it serves our purpose, our humanity purposes. And this is if we can create environmental innovations, economical innovations, and social innovations. So my first point that I want to make is by developing a smart and sustainable city, you create an opportunity to innovate for the people who will be living in this city. So the innovation will come from the government, but also from the private sector. How can I create value for the investors? Because for a long time, we had these questions. If I invest in a smart city, is it good? Always, is it good? So, actually, by investing in a smart city, you will create new financial value from an investor point of view. The first thing is you are going to optimize your investment. You're going to optimize your investment, and I will detail it in the next slides, because you are reducing your CapEx and you are minimizing your OpEx. I'll detail it next slide. And the second value is you are going to increase your revenue, because remember, you have generated new information. So with this, I can develop new services. And these services, of course, they have value, so I can sell them. So I can get revenues from the new services that I'm creating. And as a result, I am improving the IRR of my projects, the financial return, because the payback period is shorter. So how do I optimize my investment? I optimize my investment first when, for example, I reduce the duplication of assets. How many often have you seen, at the crossroad in the city, you have one camera which is used by the police. Below, you have one camera which is used by the transportation. And below, you have one camera which is used by the mall. This is 3 assets which are doing the same thing. And if I am sitting at the city level, I see that I am spending 3 times something which I should have spent only once. Why should I buy 3 cameras when one would be enough? So you can reduce duplication of assets. So when you think of the city scale, that's a lot. Another point to reduce your CapEx, your capital expenditures, is you move from control centers to command centers, to distributed technical room to command centers. You centralize. You go to systems of systems, control rooms. And by moving to the integrations of systems, we have demonstrated, for example, in building already, when you're integrating all the different technical rooms into one command center in the building, you're saving 20%, in operational expenditures. That's a lot. So OpEx, moving to reducing savings in your operations. From this command center, you will know where are the people, where are your servants. When there is an accident or when there is a maintenance issue, you will know if this person is 50 kilometers away from the event or 1 kilometer. So you will ask the closest people and also the people most qualified for the job. Because if it's a water leakage, you don't ask for someone who is an expert in energy, an energy technician to come. So from these command centers, you're optimizing your operations. How do you generate new revenues? You develop new services. And by developing new services, people will pay for it. Because these services are attractive. They attract people. You can also sell your information. Your city is gathering a lot of information. But all this information, you cannot manage all of this information. That's too much. And you already have decided as a leader that I need only this, maybe 20% of that information, and the rest I don't know what to do, but they are sitting here. Why don't I share or sell this information to some entrepreneurs? They will come and maybe they will say, oh, if I use this information and this and this and this, I can create a new service, and I will create my own company with that. And you, as a manager of the city, you say, well, this information, okay, I rent you this information. Improving the IRR is because of the attractiveness of the urban project. Then the people are moving faster to your project. Because I'll give you an example of one project that was done in France. In one portion of the city was called Issy-les-Moulineaux. And the mayor of the city, he proposed to help the citizens to reduce their energy consumption. So the city had the usage of energy of all the citizens, and actually the usage of energy of your villas, apartments, and what do you do? And as a service, they told you, okay, in this situation you should reduce this or you should do this. As a consequence, for the citizen, for the people who are living in the city, their energy bill was decreased by 20%. So that was directly a saving for the citizen. So you see, you have the mayor of the city saying, you know, if you come to my city, you will save 20% less energy than if you go to this city. So that's an added value, you know, of having such an environment. As a result, you could decide, I will increase the price per meter squared of that city. Why not? So the second point is by investing in a smart and sustainable city, you can optimize your investment. You can reduce your investments, and you can get more revenues from the service that you have generated. But there is actually something even bigger than all of this. A pattern that has not changed since 12,000 years. Do you know that since the beginning of the history of the creation of the cities, cities have been managed in silos? The security, the transportation, the energy, the water, they all work in silos. And these silos, they don't communicate to each other. The next step to improve this is we can improve the collaboration and the coordination between these silos. When you meet with the police department, they will say, oh, I could do my job better if I had information coming from the transportation department, if I had information coming from the energy department. And same if you go to the transportation, they say, oh, I could do my job better if I had information from the energy department, etc., etc. Each department can make a better job if they have access to information from other departments. When I am the mayor of a city, I don't want to manage a city which is a sum of departments. I want to manage a city as a whole. when people are coming to my city, I don't want them to say, oh, it's a city with a great police department, or it's a city with a great transportation department. No, I want them to say it's a great city as a whole. They judge it as a whole. And if only one department is not making its job properly, then the whole city is not working properly. So the future here is that departments are going to collaborate together to improve their quality of services. And by working together, you can improve resource management, the quality of the service so that the number of people will come in increase, demand management because you know better who is asking for something, where is the demand, where is the supply. Business intelligence because you know what happens in the city. The quality of the service of all departments is increased. And of course, you can generate new revenues because you can associate information coming from different departments. In addition, energy is decreased, pollution, response time between departments, damages in case of incidents because you respond faster. And also, the number of people who are managing the city. Maybe you need less. So now, we are at the corner of either we continue to develop our traditional city, which is a segmented organization, which actually destroys value because we are wasting value. And it's not a hazard that we are working towards Habitat 3 now, because all the cities in the world now, we have a big problem. We don't know how to manage that future. And that future is to me because we are based on a segmented organization. The collaborative organization is more smart and more sustainable. It creates value, as you have heard during the presentation. And it helps to manage better the resources that we need in the city. That is my conclusion. The third point that I want to come is that we need to move from a segmented organization in cities to a collaborative organization in order to create sustainable values. Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا للدكتور فيليب بوفيه. بس تنويه للعلم للأخوان الحضور، يوجد سماعات ترجمة بجانب كل كرسي يعني اللي يحتاجها. الورقة الثالثة في هذه الجلسة هي بعنوان بناء الشركات في التجديد الحضري، والمتحدث هو الدكتور بيوتر لورانس. الدكتور بيوتر يحمل درجة الدكتوراه في التخطيط الحضري، وقد تخرج في مرحلة البكالوريوس مهندسا معماريا من جامعة كدناسك للتكنولوجيا، واستكمل دراسته العليا في جامعة هارفارد ومعهد ماساتشوستس للتقنية. يعمل حاليا رئيس قسم التصميم والتخطيط الحضري والإقليمي بكلية هندسة العمارة في جامعة كدناسك للتكنولوجيا في بولندا، كما يشغل منصب نائب رئيس الجمعية الدولية لمخططي المدن والأقاليم ISOCRAP. يمارس أعماله المهنية بشكل خاص في مجال تخطيط وإدارة مشاريع التجديد الحضري، فليتفضل مشكورا.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, ministers, distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for inviting. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here and address this distinguished audience with my presentation dealing with building partnership for urban regeneration. Let me briefly introduce myself at the very beginning. Mr. Speaker was already kind enough to provide a couple of basic information, but I'd like also to introduce briefly my organization. I'm representing International Society of City and Regional Planners, which was founded in 1965 in The Hague in the Netherlands. And we are the Global Society of Planners dealing with various types of activities. And quite recently, we were very active with the Gulf area. So basically, we have extensive experience here in this region, which included extensive cooperation with Abu Dhabi Urban Planning Council. So this was a part of our experience here, so which also allowed to develop this presentation associated with the practice and issues associated with the Gulf area specifics. Within my presentation, I'll try to first of all focus a little bit about urban regeneration, what it is and how does that relate to the sustainable urban development concept. Also, what are the issues associated with this topic. And then the main part of that will be planning for urban regeneration, how to build partnerships in order to secure the best possible outcomes of this concept. And at the very end, I'll try to focus a little bit on the lessons learned already from our experience in the Gulf area, just to address the issues which are specific for this region, for this part of the world. And I'll sum up with some possible outcomes of these schemes, which can actually be of great importance for the local leaders and the local stakeholders in different cities of the region. So, first of all, as we all know, urban regeneration is associated with renewing cities, but there is a number of terms and phrases associated with renewing cities. Some of them are not so nice to us, so to speak, like famous urban renewal from the US from the 1960s. But actually, right now, urban regeneration is associated with renewing the existing urban structures, not with erasing them, but actually with renewing them, and also with making them more habitable, more useful, and more competitive in the global or globalizing economy. At the same time, this is part of the sustainable city concept, which is associated not only with renewing existing structures, but also with limiting urban sprawl, with promoting green urban design, as well as green transportation pattern. And all of that is not only the technical issue, but from our perspective and from our experience, this is first of all the business and social issue, which means that if that has to work, if that is to work, it has to be built on kind of common understanding and partnership between the key stakeholders associated with implementation of these projects. So what are the issues and concepts which are associated with urban regeneration topics? First of all, we have various concepts and types of action. It's not a kind of single type of issue which you might face in that issue. We have such things like densification of the existing structures, making them more dense, more efficient, more useful for the contemporary purposes. But this is also introduction of the new structures on the sites of the disused or erased post-industrial sites, in example. And finally, this is about regeneration of disused or distressed structures and making them renewed, reused for the new purposes, for the new issues. And this issue is already widely spread, not only in Europe, but also in very distant parts of the world, including Singapore, China, Australia, and even South America. So basically, this is a global trend right now, and there is a number of cases which we can, of course, easily refer to, but the limitation of this presentation do not allow to develop this more extensively. And within that, we can identify a number of the courses of action. First of all, this is the renewal of the physical space, which is mostly the issue for the architects, for planners, for urban designers. But this is also the issue of preservation of the heritage, which is extremely important from the local identity maintenance point of view. Here in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, this is even more important because that actually allows us to reinforce our identity and keep our identity as something which is extremely important for the future of the country. But also this is about the socio-economic recovery, which means that this is also the issue associated with building long-lasting social and economic benefits of these projects. And finally, we have to realize that this is also associated with environmental and infrastructural interventions, as in many cases these disused or distressed areas need a number of the interventions in this area. So within the planning for urban regeneration, we can say that there are two basic approaches. There is something called the master planning approach, and also there is participatory approach. Within planning, we usually love master planning for a number of reasons. I mean, many of us are architects or engineers by education, so we just believe in technical abilities that what we actually can provide for our cities, for our communities. And of course, we are right about that, but we have to realize that in some cases we miss something extremely important, which is the demand from the society and the socio-economic context of that what we are actually doing. So in that case, we should argue that we should promote some more, so to speak, participatory approach, which is associated not only with providing best technical solutions to the problem, but also with involving all stakeholders in the planning process, and also encouraging participation in implementation process, which not only makes the project good from the technical point of view, but also makes it effective and long-lasting from the socio-economic point of view, which is per se more sustainable in that case. So in that case, we can say that we should focus not only on designing for urban transformation or designing for urban regeneration, but we should focus on building partnerships for urban regeneration, as according to my perception, this is a real key to success. And due to the multidisciplinary nature of urban regeneration processes, we can think about 4 elements or 4 types of partnerships which actually can be delivered in here. So these are partnerships in planning, which are dealing with the decision-making process, partnerships in financing, based on providing funds for various types of projects. In many cases, these projects are not that cheap as we might expect. Then this is about building partnerships in implementing projects, which actually allows securing the project success in the long-term perspective. And finally, this is about building partnerships in operating the projects, which is associated, again, with providing long-lasting effects and minimizing the risks for the future of these things. So regarding partnerships in planning, so I guess the main argument here is to involve all possible stakeholders in the planning process, which allows key site users, both present and future, to participate in the decision-making process, which actually makes not only the best solutions possible, but also makes the planning process transparent, and that leads us to the conclusion that this allows avoiding social and political difficulties, which in some cases can be observed within the scope of planning for urban transformation. Regarding funding or regarding financing of these projects, we have to realize that urban regeneration projects are not usually based on a single budget. They are usually associated with a number of different sources of funding. And in that case, we should allow various financing schemes to be developed and employed, which allows not only the single developer's budget or single governmental budget to be involved in the process, but also we should allow mobilizing a small amount of funding available from different entrepreneurs or citizens or different other types of stakeholders who can contribute to the process and then benefit from the long-lasting effects of that. So that makes the regeneration process more financially diversified and more financially reliable, which I guess is the major positive outcome of this type of the partnership. Then when we speak about implementation, again, we have to talk about involving different actors in the implementation process. and allowing those diverse sectors and partners to contribute to this process makes possible successful implementation of these regeneration schemes. So what is important about that is that it makes the implementation process more close to the end users and more sustainable in the economic sense of the whole thing. We have to realize that we are arguing here about sustainability, that it's not only the eco-city, but it is also socio-economically sustainable city, and it is equally important as to the eco-city concept. And finally, we are discussing the operating partnerships, which are based on involving diverse partners into the final mode of functioning of the redevelopment sites. So that actually means that we can imagine various schemes of running those redeveloped sites or regeneration projects. And again, the whole variety of the different schemes is possible in here. But again, allowing proper discussion on how to build partnerships in operating these projects can make them more sustainable in the long run. And also, what is even more important, it can allow us to depend less and less on actual fluctuations of the market trends. So if we have just basically property-led regeneration, then we are very much depending on the land market. When we are actually having a kind of socially-led regeneration only, then we are relying mostly on the current trends and the social perception of that what we are doing. But if we are doing this in forms of the partnership, then we are more diversified and we are more safe and secure in the end. So we are more competitive in the long run, which I guess is one of our basic objectives when planning for urban transformation. As I mentioned at the very beginning of my short presentation, urban regeneration processes are right now occurring globally. They were developed and established within highly developed countries, but also introduced in the fastly developing countries, also in my part of Europe, in the Central and Eastern Europe, but also Turkey, China, Brazil, and many other places around the globe. And in general, they were based on regeneration of brownfields, but also they are more and more associated with improving the living conditions within the central and housing areas. And it's not about erasing and exchanging them, but it's about improving them as they are and making them more interesting for both the users and for the future users who can be part of that game. Now let me focus a little bit very briefly on the Gulf area dimension of urban regeneration. As far as we can see, there are already cases in the United Arab Emirates and in Qatar. I'm sorry, it's my first time to Saudi Arabia, so I really do not know much about the country yet, but I sincerely hope I will learn also from this forum about a number of the projects which I guess are underway in Saudi Arabia. But from the cases which I could already assess, which I could already develop, we can easily say that various schemes are employed, although at the moment what is a kind of major trend is to improve the central and housing areas, and that this topic is still new to the area. Still, in many countries, still in many places, the kind of urban development prevails instead of urban regeneration. There is still little understanding of that, what are the benefits and what are the issues associated with urban transformation and urban regeneration. Although we have to say that the countries and particular cities are learning very, very quickly, and they are making more and more efforts in order to secure the most successful stories in this area. The best example is Qatar, which is learning extensively from the global experience right now and developing a number of the very interesting projects in that case. And so in the end, we can say that already local leaders recognize the importance of this concept. So this concept is getting more and more valid for the area and also for the sustainable future of the sites. And in the end, in conclusion, let me focus a little bit on the possible outcomes of that, of this process, which can be important for the global and regional context. So what can we get from urban regeneration? What could be the effect? What could be the outcome? First of all, limiting urban sprawl. This is one of the issues which on one hand, we can say it's not our problem, it's not an issue, we have enough space around. But on the other hand, we have to get there. We have to transport people, we have to transport goods, we have to provide infrastructure. All that costs money. And this money is not unlimited. We have to realize that. So limiting urban sprawl is one of the issues which is on top of the urban agenda these days. And urban regeneration can actually help us in limiting urban sprawl. Secondly, this is about restricting the usage of the resources. The resources which are scarce, especially such basic resources like water. This is an issue which has to be taken into account. The third issue is shortening the transportation line and fighting traffic jams and this kind of things, which of course are associated with the particular mode of development of the particular country. But in short, urban regeneration can promote shortening the transportation lines and making also public transportation much more efficient and much more reliable. In the end, it makes cities more pedestrian friendly. Of course, this depends very much on climate and culture. In Gulf area countries, this is not so much visible these days, although in many cases this is becoming an issue. So that means that making cities more pedestrian friendly will also become, I guess, more and more important for Saudi cities. And in the end, it actually provides new investment opportunities, although these are not, so to speak, simple or easy investments. They demand more complex planning, more complex funding for complex operating, as well as needs, as this actually provides better social integration opportunities, which again is a kind of the challenge which we are facing also in the Gulf area countries. So in conclusion, each scheme can take very different form, can be associated with the very different types of partnerships. The portfolio of the possible solutions is pretty large, and there is no blueprint for that, how to make it successfully, although there is a whole set of tools which we can use in order to build these partnerships and to make urban transformation projects successful. What is important is that many of these allow actually local communities to play an important role in execution of the final scheme and retaining the prominent position in the final scheme. So in result, building regeneration projects on diversified partnerships makes them more socially and economically sustainable, which, in my opinion, contributes to the long-lasting success of the project. I would be very happy to answer your questions and answers, and thank you very much for your attention. I hope my presentation didn't go too long. Thank you very much.
شكرا للدكتور بيوتا. فتحدثنا اليوم عن ثلاث توجهات في الحقيقة، عن التوجهات أو التوجهات الحديثة في التخطيط، وتحدثنا عن التقنية والمدن الذكية والاستدامة، والورقة الأخيرة كانت عن الشراكة في الجهات القائمة على موضوع التخطيط الحضري. الآن نفتح باب المناقشة والأسئلة لو كان أحد، وأبدأ من عند الدكتور مبارك. تفضل.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is FAISAL Mubarak. I'm a professor of urban planning and former deputy mayor for Riyadh 20 years ago, and also board member for King Abdullah Economic City, which is a private, more planned city, and now I'm provost for Al-Faisal University. My question to Mr. Key is, in the case of Singapore, it's more like of a city-state, and there's interface between the nation and between the mayor, maybe role of the city. And what concerns me is the CLC Inter-Ministerial Committee. And in the case of Singapore, it sounds like you don't need that much of coordination, as all things possibly under the mayor. The problem we have here, it's very up to what extent centralized, urban management system, where there is a contribution of many ministries doing development within the city. So how can we learn from your experience, though you are a city-state, but yet you it was necessary for you to do that interministerial committee? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. As we share more about Singapore's experience around the world, we do recognize that Singapore as a city-state have both the federal level, the regional level, and the local level governance in one layer. And that, in a way, help us to kind of coordinate. But what we have found that whether at the national level, regional level, or at the local level, key principles can also be adhered, right? You can use the key principles that I've shared earlier in the Liveability Framework. So at the Liveability Framework, while it's been distilled from the lessons of Singapore, we believe that those principles can be applied at all levels. And of course, if you remember the slide I've shown, all of us want to achieve the three equal outcomes: economic competitiveness, a high quality of living for our citizens, and also a sustainable environment when we urbanize. And these three outcomes are similar whether you apply at the national level, provincial level, or regional level. The question is how then we can apply and get our officials to be able to implement it. And that is what we have shown below the waterline. And below the waterline, there are two key areas, or what we call urban systems, or how we achieve it. And one will be the integrated planning and development, and also dynamic urban governance. And embedded in that integrated development, we have key areas like thinking long-term. So whether at the national level, or the regional level, or the local level, thinking long-term is a very important part. So if we look at the local level, at the mayor level for a region, thinking long-term will still be about creating economic growth opportunities. It will still be about creating access to clean water. It will still be about creating homes, a livable home for citizens. So we believe that the principles can be applied at all levels. But we do recognize that many countries around the world, many cities, have very different operating climate, operating circumstances. But what has benefited Singapore was the ability to pool the different agencies together. And I think this is what we find in many other cities as well. I think my co-presenter talked about working, we tend to have agencies working in silos. And working in silos transcends whether it's at a national level, regional level, or local level. So if we are able to then work collaboratively at whichever level, that will be a good start in creating a livable city for that particular focus.
To allow for more questions, please introduce yourself and the question, please.
Thank you for all the three speakers. Dr. Hussam Alwair from University of Dundee in the UK. My questions to Mr. Key, and actually it might be not questions, it's a comment. I just would like to say something quite important. One thing I admire about Singapore, the leadership and the rule of the leadership. More importantly, when the political cycle change, those who came in power, they believe and they buy into the previous vision. And that's one thing I found it quite stimulating in Singapore now, in Melbourne in Australia, and in a city called Freiburg in Germany. It is about long-term vision and how the leadership, when he passed the power to another leadership, buy into the previous vision. And another thing I really found it interesting, the concept of master planning, not a master plan, planning. That means revisiting the master plan from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. We consider this is just a comment, just to open the door. Any other question? Dr. Abdullah?
حقيقة أنا عندي نوع من المداخلة فقط.
دكتور عبد الله الفايز بس عشان أعرف.
دكتور عبد الله الفايز مهندس معماري. Dr. Abdullah Al-Faiz, I'm an architect, urban planner. I just have like a small interjection actually. And since we're talking about trend and innovation in cities, I think we have this confusion between smart, intelligent, and sustainable and green. And those are like three types of cities that we will probably see in the future. And not all smart cities are green, and not all green are smart, and not both of them are sustainable. I mean, We have to distinguish between these three types of cities. You know, I mean, smart, you're using data and technology, and green, you are using resources and minimizing, you know, zero emission. And then when we talk about sustainable, we're using policies and things. So we have three types of cities, and probably they are, you know, mutually interchangeable, but they don't really, not each one lead to the other. So I just want to have this to be like a base for our discussion. So we know there's three different cities that we will have in the future. Thank you.
Dr. Bouvier.
Yes, you're very right. Actually, over the time, the types of cities have changed. So maybe I would say that today, just define our own new type. We don't need to be similar to another type. We just maybe need to define our vision, what we need, because here in Saudi is not same as in China, same as in Europe, totally different. So we have different needs, local needs. We also have the influence of international trends, and we put all this together and we can define our vision, where we want to go, and adapt the environment to support that vision. And I think the use of technology could be good, because technology is helping us to understand what is happening in our own environment. So then what we do with that information is up to us. Thank you.
Sometimes when you talk about smart city, I think of Star Wars.
Hello. Yes, hi, my name is Nadim Bitar. I'm an expert on smart and sustainable cities, and I have a question for all the participants. I want to talk about not a new trends in urban planning, but do we need a new paradigm in urban planning? Because the three of you touch on some kind of a paradigm shift. So from your perspective, are we witnessing a paradigm shift in urban planning?
Well, thank you very much for your question. I guess this is a very important issue. We have to realize that the major paradigm shift is not only from defensive city to the smart city, as Dr. Bouvier was actually mentioning, because it's only one part of the whole game. But there are two other things which we have to include in that, which basically means we have to expand our paradigm of planning and not only focus on the form of city or the type of city, but also how we plan the city, so actually how we build partnerships for planning and implementing, and then how we implement these concepts. This is extremely important. So that calls for a kind of shift from the design approach to the strategic planning approach. And I think this is this major shift which has to be taken into account. And I don't say this is the one and only solution to all the world's problems, but it's definitely the trend within which we are following.
دكتور عبد الرحمن مداخلة.
عبد الرحمن Ali Sheikh, Chairman of the Organizing Committee. My question is directed to Dr. Bouvier. First, I'd like to thank you for your informative presentation. My question is, the smart city concept is becoming interesting, and would like to know how, first, if you want to transform or start transforming into smartness in any city, what are the basic elements that you should look for? And second, how long this process, from your experience, would take?
How to transform an existing city into a smart city? First, should you move to a smart city? This is actually the question. Because the first question is, you define your vision, I think. And then this vision will maybe move you to a smart city. So I will assume that you want to walk through the smart city approach. That means I want to include technology in my development. And
Why do I include technology? I want to include technology because I want to be informed of what happens in my city. So that's the reason why I use technology. By being informed, then I can take different decisions. So my question is, what type of actually new decisions you want to do with this? So you have to define that. I think, what do you want to achieve? Because by what you want to achieve, then you will go back and use the technology to help you to achieve this. But it's not, I put the technology, and this is the best technology today, and then what can I build on top of this? Okay, I can do this, but actually my need is to do something else. So I really need to understand the need first. So the first step in this direction is I want to define my vision. I want to have a vision. Where do I want to go? And then I will only use the technology to support that vision. How long does it take? It depends if you already have some infrastructure that helps you to support the sensors in the city or not. Cities who have started in the 70s and later to be a digital city, they already have some kind of infrastructure, so we can build on that. And that's how Singapore is doing so fast, because they built the infrastructure a long time ago. Then I think there is this mindset, which I believe is important, is I believe deeply that departments should work together. And I also think that in some countries, this is going to happen, and in some other countries, this is not going to happen because of the culture, because of the ego of the people, because of the incentives that the head of departments have. So, but if I assume that the countries who have this culture, that they are willing to work together, when they will make this, then things will happen even faster instead of competing between each other.
Thank you very much. Last question before we close.
مساكم الله بالخير. بداية إبراهيم البدران أمين مجلس منطقة حائل. أولا أشكر القائمين على المنتدى وعلى اختيار المواضيع واختيار الأشخاص المتحدثين. أنا حقيقة شعرت أثناء طرح جميع الأوراق الثلاث أنها تحكي عن وضعنا القائم في مناطقنا، خاصة زي مناطق الأقل شوي نمو. فشعرت أنه فكرة أنه يوجد أجهزة تكون ذات سلطة قانونية على القطاعات بحيث أنها تقوم بعملية التنسيق، هذا أمر مهم، وأشعر أنها تحاكي مجالس المناطق أو الهيئات بالمناطق. فودنا نسأل كيف يعني أوجد الجهاز وما هي مهامه وصلاحياته بحيث أننا ممكن نطور أجهزتنا اللي الآن بدأت تفعل أو تعمل من خلال مجالس المناطق أو الهيئات الموجودة، وخاصة فيما ذكره الدكتور فيليب. شكرا لك.
ممكن أجاوب أنا عنهم. في إبراهيم في جلسة إن شاء الله بكرة خاصة بالعلاقة بالمجالس والمناطق وكيف نستطيع أن نربط. يمكن تجاوب كثير على تساؤلك إذا أنا فهمت سؤالك صح.
أعتقد في المدينة الذكية تكلم عن أن المدينة سايلو مختلفة، إدارة مختلفة، أنه يجب أن يكون فيها تنسيق وتعاون أكبر يعني. وأعتقد هذا هو يمكن بداية أن لا تعمل هذه الأجهزة بمفردها، وقد تكون وجود شيء ينسق بينها كجهاز، يا مكتب يا مجلس المنطقة يا هيئة يا جهة أخرى. وأعتقد مثل ما ذكر الدكتور عبد الرحمن يعني هذا بيكون في الجلسة القادمة، الجلسة اللي بكرة أعتقد بتكون هي محور النقاش يعني.
طبعا أنا أتكلم عن تجربة فيليب في تنسيق حقيقة، يعني مستفيد، حنا ممكن نستفيد من هالجلسة للجلسة القادمة. بس سؤالي أنا كيف فعلا يعني نصل إلى نتيجة إيجابية بهالمجال ها، خاصة إننا فعلا نعاني من عدم التنسيق بالمناطق بكل صدق. مو عيب ان نكون واضحين الان، لكن نحتاج فعلا الى ان نكون عشان الندوات والملتقيات هذه تصل الى نتيجه.
واضح، بس if you want to talk about it, he's just saying how we can collaborate by creating maybe another body, يعني, which is a council or whatever. يعني.
Yes. So on the question of collaboration, when I visited different countries, and I met with different type of departments, I was always surprised that each department, when I met with them, and I asked, what do you need from the other departments? They always have a list of things. And then I asked them, and this is in all different countries, you know. And then I asked them, are you willing to share your own information with these departments and collaborate with them? And with my experience in the past, they were always willing to collaborate because they have seen value in collaborating, because they know they can make their job better, easier, and cheaper if they collaborate. I am French, and I know in France this is going to be very difficult to have this discussion because they like to fight. They have strong ego, departments, they enjoy fighting. So I'm not saying this presentation in France, but in other countries, and that's why I'm doing it here, because I believe that you have this power that you can share between you things that you have, and you can build a better good. Yes.
Very good. You want to come? Yes. Just in 30 seconds.
Sure, of course. All I can say is that it's not only about cooperating, but it is also actually about building public-public partnerships with different projects and different concepts. And this is extremely important, that we actually recognize ourselves as partners, and we even do establish some kind of formal partnerships in order to solve certain solutions. Thank you.
Okay. Just a quick comment about collaboration, just sharing the Singapore experience. It goes back to human capital, human resource development. So in a government, it's very deliberate that we move around different agencies. So for example, myself, I started with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So I was spending a lot of time concerning about economic generation, economic growth issues. But after which I was rotated to the Ministry of Education to understand from the upstream point of view, what sort of graduates should we be having to be working in the industry. And now coming to the Ministry of National Development is very different work. So by rotating your human capital, you will find that at some point in time, they'll be defending issues where they previously were rejected if they were in another position. And this constant rotation and human capital development allow us to fully understand each other a bit better so that we don't work in silos and then we work more collaboratively. So maybe something as a suggestion, experience from Singapore. Thank you.
في نهاية الجلسة نشكر المتحدثين الثلاثة، كما نشكر وزارة الشؤون البلدية والقروية وعلى رأسها معالي الوزير، ونشكر سعادة الدكتور عبد الرحمن آل الشيخ رئيس اللجنة المنظمة والزملاء في الوزارة، ونشكر الجمهور على حضورهم ومشاركتهم في النقاش، وشكرا جزيلا للجميع.
ونحن أيضا نشكر معاليكم ونشكر المتحدثين، ونأمل من معاليكم تسليم الدروع للأخوة المتحدثين.
Mr. Out Wan Ki, Dr. Philip Bouvier, Dr. Piotr Lawrence.
ندعو رئيس اللجنة المنظمة لتكريم رئيس الجلسة. شكرا للجميع، وننوه بأن الجلسة الثانية بعنوان مبادئ في التحول الحضري ستبدأ بإذن الله في تمام الساعة 1. شكرا. ستعقد أيضا ورشة عمل موازية للمحاضرة القادمة في القاعة رقم 1 لمن يرغب التسجيل الذهاب مباشرة للقاعة. شكرا.